forgiven this monster AD carry player in League of Legends. In terms of talent and mentality, again, it's like a simple, unbelievable. He's one of the few Westerners who in the right meta with any of his 4 or 5 champions that if they were in the right meta would be available. And a team based around him would be comparable to the gods of the Asian scene. He really would be. He'd be up there with those beast AD carries from Asia. Now, his problem, the team aspect again. And when he's not in his meta, then his mentality actually gives up a bit. And if he can't be the carry, he has problems being just a supportive player or playing just a lesser role like someone else can. He has these issues that he's trying to overcome. And can I trust teammates? And if they let me down, how do I deal with that myself? These are all his problems. Another guy, in a similar vein, Double Lift, AD carry of CLG. This is a guy where he's been through it all. He was the super carry and he thought he had the teammates, but they were falling off and then they didn't care about the game. Then he got newer players in and they were chokers and they were players who were passive aggressive and they didn't have the right mentality, and then they would just blame him if he tried to be the confident leader and cocky and all that stuff. And then if he didn't do that stuff and he put it on them, they couldn't lead and they fell apart. And so he's been waiting all this time, and now finally he's got to an LCS final. Now he's got some teammates who can take some initiative, who he can share some of the load with, but he can still be the star himself. Maybe of those three, he's the closest to getting there. Maybe he's going to win now, maybe he's going to do it. We don't know yet, but his career's been tortured because it's been so long. The other ones have only had a couple of years. He's had like 4 or 5 years. He's still waiting for probably like 3 or 4 more 3 years realistically. And it still hasn't quite got his shit together there. So to me, Device has incredible talent. And if you apply it properly, he can definitely be your star player, definitely carry the team, as we saw in autumn of last year when he'd gotten over all the choking issues. Not only has his team won tournaments in the summer, but now he was like a guaranteed 20 frag guy every map, it felt like. No matter what the circumstances, no matter what the opponent, no matter if his team was losing, he was always going to be consistent in his output, and he wasn't having underperformances. His team sometimes were losing because they weren't as good, or they were playing fantastic opponents that just edged them, like when Envious beat them a bunch of times. It's also worth saying that he hasn't choked every time, even in this little downswing where Astralis went from being like a top 2, top 3 team to like a 4th or 5th best team. He hasn't choked every time then. He has sometimes, like... But you think of some recent occasions that they choked. Okay, so obviously the MLG semi-finals, a pretty obvious one, versus Na'Vi, where they lost 0-2. Well, on map 1, Inferno, he was one of the main reasons why they got that game to 14-14, and he was playing pretty well, except for on that last round, where, yeah, he missed some shots, but that was also some communication issues within his team. Then you look, the series against NIP, they decided to get out the group at DreamHack Malmö. Well, this wasn't Device choking. This guy was actually very good on 2 of the maps. And particularly on the deciding map, Trading was one of the only reasons they were even in that game still. So yeah, he still does choke sometimes, but it's not only him choking, and it's not him choking all the time that is holding Astralis back. So he's worth the gamble in terms of his skill level and what he's capable of. If you put him in the right situations, I think he'd be more effective. And more importantly, he's not just going to choke all the time, though choking is an issue still for him. But more importantly, when the team chokes, he's not the only one who chokes, and it's not always him who chokes. That's worth pointing out as a distinction. I always emphasize when he chokes, because to me, he is such a fantastic player, so well-rounded, so skilled, that he's someone where I feel like if he can just get even 5 to 10% more performance in terms of less choking in a game, he'll start winning some of these games from regardless of what's going on elsewhere in the team, and he'll win some of these matches, and they'll start winning more tournaments. But we've got some pretty young guys here. MSL 21. We've got guys who can be playing for like 5, 6 more years, longer in some cases, but 4, 5, 6 more years. The window for them to make a very good team out of these players is still very much present. So there's still a lot of time for this to get fixed. If you were to put together the best team, I think it could be like the TSM team of last year, and it could be potentially the best team in the world, because they have the position, they have all the roles covered essentially if they have the right picks there. I don't think this is even really that debatable, that there is a huge mid lane bias in League of Legends, and it really is the esports side of League of Legends, because on solo queue, listen, if you get to a low enough rank, any role can carry, any role can dominate the game. A good enough player there can affect the game. You can use almost any champion. But in the top level, where you're trying to use optimal things, the most efficient things, trying to use strategies which facilitate those being even more powerful, you can find that there's this huge mid lane bias in terms of strength of the mid lane as a traditional carry role, strength of mid lane relative to the other roles in the game, and strength of mid lane in terms of the impact you can have on an overall game, contrasted against, crucially, the other carry roles, the top lane role and the AD carry. So first and foremost, the mid lane has been a carry role up to as hard a carry as you can be every single competitive era of League of Legends. Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, Season 4, Season 5 now. In every single meta, it has been either the hardest carry role or tied for hardest carry role or one or top 2 In general, biggest carry role in every era, which doesn't follow with the idea that these are other top can carry, AD carry can carry. All these positions have had different times. So almost every single, and as a result of it being the main carry, almost every single truly great team, obviously that's a very debatable topic, but I'm going to define it myself, has had a world-class mid laner, which suggests that you even have to have a world-class mid laner to be a truly great team. I think that's a pretty obvious correlation you can make there.
And what's funny is, this will sound abstract, but actually the area of divination, which divination, by the way, is like another term for using psychic abilities to predict the future in terms of trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future. That's an interesting misnomer, though, okay? Is that people think divination is about trying to predict the future, as in read what will happen in the future. Like this example here, like that guy read the future somehow, knew TSM would win the game or NiP would win the game. They think that's what divination is. You're supposed to just be looking and you're then going to know what happens in the future. Actually, what's interesting, even the field of divination, if you look into it further, is not about that. Actually, in general, the history of divination, when you go back in history and look at what's been going on, the psychological processes, is it's about formulating a model of the universe. And the universe exists as it is, and it's massive and vast, and there's all these different complex forces. So what you do is you form your own small model, a little microcosm of the universe. And you have these little symbols within it, and the symbols will represent aspects of the universe, like physical things. Other symbols will represent forces that are at work. And the interaction between these forces and between these aspects and how they interconnect to each other and what they mean in reference directly to another thing, and then the qualities, that secondary qualities that come off that, which might refer to something else. The positioning of these things and the reference points then allows you to try and think, since this is a microcosm of the universe itself, okay, well, if these aspects interact in this way and this thing is suggested from this kind of drawing of them, then would that happen in the bigger world, in the macrocosm, in what this model is representing? Would that thing happen there the same way? And the idea is, if you've got enough skill at doing it, then it would in that sense. That whole process I described there, which is really subjective, it's more about what you think and conclusions you've come to, what's inside of you and how you interpret it and how you see things go in your perception of the world. That's what actual analysis in esports is like. Esports isn't some perfect science where you're looking at these two factors and you're saying, right, there'll be an interaction, I know exactly that this will happen here. It's more like, what is your underlying philosophy? What does your experience tell you? When these things happen in previous scenarios and you model them down here with this player, this type of a player battles that type of a player, and I've seen him play these matches before, and in this sort of situation I know that he has a tendency to go that way. You're giving your own subjective perception of the world. How do you see it happening? And that's what's interesting, is the really interesting part. In fact, the only part of any value or with any vital importance within predictions is that part, is the reasons you give and the explanation of how you come to those conclusions, and if you can, hinting at some sort of philosophy. So, for example, I think that certain sort of defensive teams in this way have to play a little bit more perfectly because they're playing reactively, whereas people who are proactive, yes, they can gamble and lose, but they also have an aggression. They force people. The surprise factor is there. This is a general philosophy that I'm describing now. So now you would see when I see certain matchups, that's why certain teams I would actually favour, even though I think they're better. Sometimes it'll even the matchup up because they have to play a little bit more perfectly than the other does. The other can be a bit more loose, a bit more roughshod, a bit more sloppy, and they can win. If you have market dominance, if you actually are the best, you don't need exclusivity here. In fact, the fact that you have $18 million, or whatever the amount is, this is a hypothetical in this scenario, since that we don't know if that'll come true, but if you have $18 million, like easily over 10 times anyone else, and you can't put on the best tournament that the teams would choose to go to without fucking everyone, that suggests to me that there's some sort of insecurity there where deep down you must know that you're not as good. You must have something a bit sinister going on that you have to try and force money, force teams, force players, force organizations out of esports because you know that you aren't really that good. Like deep down, and even though I've only got $5 billion and I know your tournament's only 10,000. How can I persuade you to come to my tournament? Well, I mean, with 5 billion, you could probably be better in every single regard. Yeah, but I'm probably not going to be. So is there another way I could make sure you come? I mean, I guess you could say I've got 5 billion and you can't have part of my 5 billion unless you only play in my tournaments. Yeah. That sounds better than actually, putting on tournaments, making them run properly, looking out to the interests of the players. and trying to actually have a really big esport, all those things that I say I want to do, and that really should be the job of someone in my position. But instead, I'll just use this money as a leverage to fuck everyone else in esports, because that's how much I love esport. Like, what the fuck's going on here, guys? I don't really like this idea that just because you have the most money, you should like crush the game and control it. Especially when you're going to crush it, you're going to restrict it, you're going to control it, you're going to bleed it out, you're going to tell people how to do things, you're going to fucking end up, as in League of Legends, fining people, banning people, suddenly controlling aspects of people's lives, even beyond tournaments, and fucking setting up some computers and having people play a game. If you're going to do all that, it's not even that you're going to do all that, because that's obnoxious and horrible as it is. But inevitably, it'll be done under the banner of like, and we're trying to grow the game and make it more professional, and we're making it like real sports. It'll always be the horrible, tyrannical behavior done under like the nicest banner of these are the greatest guys who only have the growth of esports and the game in mind. Like, it's all just a bit of bullshit, isn't it? So hopefully there can be some kind of reasonable path charted here. But I don't like the concept of total exclusivity for obvious reasons, as I've outlined.
First and foremost, if you were describing to someone who came from outside of League of Legends, like, and they were like, who is Faker? It wouldn't be enough to just say to them, oh, Faker's the best player ever. Like, even just saying that might still give them the notion that, like, oh, right, so of League of Legends players, there's like, say, like the 10 best players, and then there's like Faker, but then right next to him or in competition with him is like number 2, and then number 3 is quite close, and number 4, number 5. It really is the case that Faker is such a transcendent talent and so incredibly widespread in the areas that he's like a 10 out of 10 in terms of like intelligence, decision-making, skill, matchups, composure under pressure. He really is like a 10 out of 10 in so many different areas that he's more than just the best player. As in, if Faker didn't exist, the next guy up who'd become the best player, whoever that might be, like, I don't know, Dade or Wei Zhao, one of these sorts of like these sorts of players who could be in that role, they aren't 10s in all these areas. Like, they might be a 10 in one area, or they might be 9 in a bunch, or they might have like 10 in this area, but like 7 in this one. But the team that they play in makes them be able to be the best. The difference is, Faker really is that much above and beyond the others that you have to emphasize that and really articulate that this guy is special, not even just for a League of Legends player, for any player ever in esports. That's the sort of talent and ability that we're talking about, like a really unique, once in a generation, once in a lifetime type player, comparable with the true gods of some of those other games where they really were just the best ever.
So why do we have to think about this? Because of Nicken and Lyhorn, right? There's always an angle with this guy, and the angle always involves, on some level, fucking everyone else while benefiting himself. He really does live in that supposedly apocryphal Genghis Khan quote of like, it is not enough that I succeed, others must lose. That even means people who work with him, by the way. He really is the guy where you get down the road in that used car that he sold you, and even though he sold you the fucking car, he's still going to sell you the one where the engine just falls out, and then he's going to go, well, must have been the way you handled it around that 100 metres of a corner that you took. So this is a guy where we've already seen the bullshit with the 7-man roster. It was nonsense, but it made the community headlines. It made the discussion the same way. It made people start talking about the efficacy of utilising a player this way and player burnout and other conditions. It all did the great job of doing what happens with Nicken and Lyhorn, which is you always have the distraction. Now, here's the thing. It's not meant for me. That's why I can see through this shit, why I can catch this guy all the time. Because the lie isn't meant for me. And on some level, it doesn't matter that I figure it out. And I tell you in this video, because I'm not going to reach everyone in the whole scene. I'm not going to reach all the business people in the world. Even if I do, I'm certainly not going to convince them. And I'm not the sort of person who tries to say, just believe me. I just present my opinions. I present the facts that I have. I present my logic. What you do with it at that point in time is up to you. I'm not a con man. I'm not a salesman in that way. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm presenting my information and I get paid as a result because I know the way the game works. So this is meant for random plebs to just see and lap up and follow the distractions of him pointing this way, and you watch the way his fingers go and don't look at he's pulling a fucking dove out of his other pocket or a coin out of his back pocket to put behind your ear. It's meant for investors and for businessmen who just know on a business level that these things sound good but don't see the holistic picture to know why he would be doing this or where he's moving his pieces on the chessboard. The problem I have with all of this, aside from the general scumbaggery of it and the fact that it shows that don't really value those players as human beings in any way, they're just pieces of meat to you, and you try to just, as I say, trussy up that fucking turkey, make it look all fat and plump and juicy, and even though that person thinks you're a friend of his, trying to benefit him in his career, you're just trying to benefit yourself and your career, and while it helps you, you'll align your interests with him, and when it doesn't, you'll just sell him off, and he'll be gone, and you'll make all the money in the universe, and you'll be the one with the Astralis brand name, and he'll just be a player playing for who knows where the fuck he's playing for, where Arcade and be. And whereas
Carrigan in comparison to where they once were when they built up this enormous brand name.
They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back, and supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, The Concept, Animosity, Banediesel, Ben Glass, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.